Chris Beckwith from Camp Hobie, and I am happy to introduce Daryl and Devin. They're both from Camp One Step, which is from Children's Oncology Services based in Chicago. Daryl is the Chief Programs Officer, and he's been involved with their program for 13 years, starting as a volunteer counselor in 2007. He's been a program leader, program director, and also served in other leadership roles. And then Devin is the program manager. She's been involved with their program since 2012 and has also served in many roles. She's volunteered for their summer camp, their winter camp, and also their Dude Ranch programs. And I will turn it over to them now.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having us. Sorry to interrupt the music. I actually was kind of enjoying it a little bit more, but you know, it's all good. So let's get right to it. All righty. If technology is working, because it always does, right? You guys can see the first piece of our slide. So we're going to share some information with you guys today and some of our experiences around virtual staff training. I know that a lot of camps have been operating for a lot of years. We have as well. And so you kind of have your way of organizing your staff training and education, right? So this year, with a lot of us going virtual, we had to do some things a little bit different.
Cool. So Daryl, I don't know if this is your intention, but we can also see the next slide.
That's
or I can
great.
See the next slide.
Can everyone see the next slide?
Yes.
Everyone can, okay.
Awesome.
So while you're working on that, I'll go over our objectives quickly. So we're not going to sit there and read everything to you, but just kind of a quick breakdown of how we're going to go through this. We'll give you some introductions about ourselves. We'll talk a little bit about Camp One Step and our virtual programs thus far. Perfect, Daryl. We'll talk a little bit about traditional staff training, just kind of the why of what we do and some of the differences with that. We'll talk about some parallels and some differences between in-person and virtual staff training. We'll talk specifically about virtual considerations, and then we'll talk a little bit about lessons we learned, things we changed from program to program, as well as some things, you know, we're still open to suggestions because I don't think anyone has the virtual thing completely down pat yet. So that's just quickly what our schedule is going to look like today.
Perfect. And so here is our contact information. We can also drop this in the chat later. So if you have any questions or any information that we talk about along the way that you would love for us to share with you, we're more than happy to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. As mentioned before, I'm the Chief Programs Officer for Camp One Step. I've been involved for about 13 years now, previously as a counselor for about 6 years, and in this role for the last 7. And so excited to be here.
And also mentioned, I'm Devin, I'm our programs manager. I actually just started working for camp last year. So I had a full year under my belt and then COVID hit. So it's been a big transition and we're working through it. But just before we jump into our presentation, I want to talk a little bit about our virtual programs thus far. So as a whole organization, we put on 11 programs each year, really year round. There isn't a month that we don't have things that we're currently working on for a program. So we have those 11 programs. Since we've gone virtual, we have put on 7 different virtual programs. So we started with a big pivot in the spring. We already had applications open to be in person, and obviously that didn't work out. So we pivoted to virtual. And so we had 2 of our spring programs, and then we have our 3 summer programs that we planned to be virtual. So the planning of those trainings and stuff looked very different for our spring programs versus our summer programs, and how we kind of went about achieving those goals as well. Also, just a quick overview, we did accept new staff for our virtual programs. That was one of the conversations we had. Do we, don't we? What is that going to look like for new folks? But we ended up taking new staff, and so that training has looked a little bit different as well. And we have put on both an orientation for one of our programs and one of our upcoming virtual programs, as well as individual trainings for some of the smaller programs that we put on as well. So our flagship program is our summer camp program. We held that, it's a 2-week program for us in July. So that program we did hold an orientation, obviously a virtual orientation, and then we did do virtual trainings for the other 6 programs that we did virtually this year as well. So we're not going to get into specifics about the programs unless people have specific questions, but just wanted to kind of give an overview about how that staff training has kind of adapted, and obviously we're going to touch on a lot more details. So I think that's a quick overview.
Awesome. So why do we need to educate our staff? You know, for a variety of reasons. Many of our camp programs and COCA are Gold Ribbon certified. We're all aware if you receive funds from COCA, that Gold Ribbon certification will be a necessity, but also just for camper and counselor safety, right? And so one of the things that we had to look at when we were thinking about transitioning to virtual is, okay, we're going to have to pivot and do this differently. And a lot of our long-term volunteers, and I'm sure this is just intrinsic to us and it doesn't impact you guys because you guys don't have volunteers that say, hey, we've always done it this way, right? So that only happens with us. So we had a good number of volunteers that didn't understand or were a little apprehensive, I should say, about transitioning to virtual and what that would look like and how that would function, because we've always done it this way. This is the only way we've ever done it. So this must be the best way to do it, right? And so as we began to look at that, we really started to dive into kind of the difference between orientation and training, okay? Because I know a lot of groups use that word kind of those 2 words interchangeably, but they are very different. One of which is, you know, as you see here, orientation is more about teaching people the fundamentals and the basics of your organization and how they work, but training is more about teaching them how to be able to successfully perform their task and job. And so what we really wanted to be able to do is cover our bases that we are required to cover from an insurance perspective, from a safety perspective, but also share some information that was relevant to a virtual perspective. So for example, as Devin mentioned, we had a virtual orientation for our summer camp that was a couple of hours on a weekend, which normally, traditionally, I should say, our in-person orientation for our summer camp starts on a Friday evening and runs through about a Saturday afternoon, and the volunteers, the staff stay overnight on campus. Again, with some of the things being a little bit different, with us not having to share information on, say, bedwetting or toileting or things like that, things that don't occur virtually, we were able to kind of truncate that timetable and share with them the information that they truly needed for a virtual program.
Awesome. So as the top says, it's kind of the same, but it's also very different. So like Daryl's just mentioning, you know, you have similar goals for the training. You have, you know, similar camp specific and camper specific information that you want to share. You know, code of behavior is still the same. It just looks a little different virtually, but you also have different ways to achieve those goals, and you have different modes of communication. You have new material that you have to teach. So as Daryl mentioned, you don't have to teach some of those in-person things, but now you're teaching virtual components. You're teaching Zoom. I mean, that's a program we use, and I see the conference is using it as well, but you know, you have to teach elements of that and best practices for that as well. So it really does tack on some extra stuff that, you know, I don't think we ever thought we were going to be teaching people these technology and virtual pieces, but we are, and we've learned a lot through that. So Looking at this list, we're going to kind of compare them left to right. So an in-person programming versus virtual programming. So we're looking at the first one, your captive audience versus, not captive audience, and where it's a little easier to be distracted. So with the captive audience, when you're in person, you're on the ground, you're learning hands-on, you're around people, you feel that connection. It's really easy. Well, I shouldn't say really easy. It's easier to stay focused because what's happening is right in front of you, and it's just different, right? And so it can also be kind of tiring when you're in person. It's a lot. You're taking in a lot of information and you are interacting with so many different new people. So there are kind of some pros with that. And when you're a captive audience, when you're in person for programming and for training, you're kind of in that little bubble, right? We know that camp bubble, and it's like nothing else in the world is happening except what's in that bubble. And that is, it helps with attention, it helps with focus. It's just a very different thing compared to, on the other hand, we have the virtual programming and training, right? So you are in whatever environment you choose to be in, and that can be a great thing, and that can also be really tough. So, you have to be intrinsically motivated for virtual training. You have to sit down and be willing to focus on your computer. There's a lot of distractions. Like, for instance, you could be looking online. Holidays are coming around, holiday shopping. I find myself just sometimes slowly trailing to those websites, and we have really no way of making sure that people are focusing on us besides trying to make it engaging and exciting and tying it back into their personal connections as well. So, there's things happening in the home and with your life around you when you're doing virtual training and programming. You don't know if you have children or pets, someone's going to run through the background or like my cat loves to do, jump literally on top of my keyboard and put his butt in the screen. So you can't really stop that. And you have to kind of take those things and work with it, right? Everything happens. We're going to work through it. We're going to laugh about it. Being able to be kind of that humility piece of this is my life. And, unfortunately, it's not the camp bubble, but this is my bubble right now. So working through those pieces. Thinking about travel and accommodations versus being able to join from anywhere. As Daryl mentioned, for our orientation, we hold an overnight program. So that means we're doing lodging, we're doing meals, we sometimes have to figure out transportation for folks. It's a lot to consider. And with that, that's money, right? We're paying for an overnight conference day at our programming location. The logistics of it, the planning of it, of who can room with whom, which buildings are going to be open, which facilities do we need access to, where's the closest bathroom, all those pieces, like the accessibility. Those are things you have to consider when you're in person. And then you think about that for virtual training, and those things all kind of go away, right? You have to, yes, make sure that people have the technology needed to join the training. They have the internet or whatever's necessary to physically be present, or I should say virtually be present, but you can really join from anywhere. And so with that, that's a really good thing, right? It saves you some costs, and it makes it more accessible for people who are maybe across the country that don't now have to pay for a flight ticket to join you where you're at. But it also brings up some considerations and some concerns. What's the reliability of your internet? What if your service goes down? What's your plan B? What's your backup plan? So considering all those things, Also, some learning needs. Online learning does not work for everyone, and we've seen that with our campers too. Some are like, I tried a virtual program, it wasn't for me, can't wait till we're back in person. And that's okay, right? Some of that's with our staff too. I tried being a counselor for our virtual programs, it wasn't for me, that's okay. And that's part of that, you're outside of that bubble as well. And so you also have to consider some of, the protected information that we share at training. We talk about campers with special needs. We talk about, even virtually, how to make programs accessible and adaptable. And so you have to consider where you are. You're joining from anywhere, yes, but who's also here listening to that information with you since you're in a virtual environment. Moving on to the last piece, we've kind of been blurring and talking about all of these together. But so you're easier it's easier to participate when you're in person. And then you have to consider some of the virtual programming and training, some of those tech challenges. So when you're in person, like I said, it's hands-on usually. It's for a lot of people, that makes it easier to learn. You're learning by doing, not just taking in information. It's also, when you're in person, especially think about being a new staff member. You are able to come there, you're able to meet other new staff members, you're able to meet returners who can really give you some helpful information. When you're online, those connections are really tough to make unless you're intentional with your training and giving those new staff folks a chance to meet other new people or to kind of mentor and buddy up with someone who is returning to the program. So just not physically being in that environment can be really tough for all staff, but particularly someone new. So with some of those tech challenges, we talked a little bit about it, but it's not only device issues, but network issues, Zoom issues. You're teaching them how to Zoom. You're teaching them some best practices with Zoom that you have to learn first before you can even teach your staff that. So with us having done 7 programs, there are definitely things that we learned after program 1, program 2, program 3 that now we're able to train people on. But really, that was learning on the go as we went because, you know, this virtual realm is so new to everyone. Also a tech challenge, you're there, but are you mentally there, right? Like I said, who knows what type of browsers people have open, searching for, you know, watching Netflix, you know, everything going on. You know, my partner is always in the other room playing his video games. And I know sometimes when I'm on those calls, you can hear the sounds or, you know, you can see the lights hitting my face. And it's like, I know I'm paying attention, I'm actively engaged, but what are other people thinking about this? And that's just kind of part of life and everything with that. So again, just kind of discussing those similarities and differences, really important to kind of work through some of these things before you even start to plan virtual training, because you have to consider all the things you never had to consider before. And that's adaptation, that's making it accessible. One thing we had to start for our virtual programs, we started a technology assistance fund because we knew some of our families did not have access to a computer. They maybe didn't have great, reliable devices. We know a lot of our kids got, what are they called, Chromebooks from school, but sometimes that doesn't work with Zoom, right? So we actually set up our technology assistance fund, and we have checkout iPads that we send to campers, and then they can send back to us once the program's over. So, and that's for staff as well, because some of our staff don't have access to those things. So that was definitely something we had to consider for all of our trainings as well.
Awesome. And as we go forward, you guys can feel free to jump in and drop in questions into the chat, and we're going to address those as we go. As Devin was mentioning, some of the considerations, right? We tell our staff, hey, when you're joining Zoom, you know, location, location, location. Even if you've used similar platforms, Microsoft Teams, whatever the case may be, for work or for other camps, consider that when you're joining, when you're logging in, you're allowing the people that are on screen into the whatever location you're in, right? So we tell them jokingly but seriously, hey guys, don't join from a bar. It's not appropriate, right? Don't join from, you know, from your house party or, you know, another thing that surfaced this summer, and this is very coincidental, and we hadn't thought about it at the time. During our summer camp, we had a couple of counselors that got together at one counselor's house while on Zoom, and none of them were wearing masks, right? And so there's a camper that actually put in the chat, hey, why are the counselors together and they're not wearing masks? And it was one of those moments like, hey, you know, we kind of got busted there, right? In addition to that, we do ask our staff to report to the Zoom sane and sober. Hey guys, if you're going to consume illicit or illegal drugs, please don't log in. Communicate, say, hey, you know what, I've been drinking, I've been fill in the blank, I'm not in the right frame I should be to join Zoom, because those expectations that we have boots on the ground would still apply in the virtual world. Another thing that Devin mentioned, HIPAA standards, all right? If you're joining from a device, do you have it on speakerphone? Who's within earshot? If we're communicating information about a camp or campers sharing information about their diagnosis or treatment or whatever the case may be on Zoom, who else in the room or in the area you're at, who can hear that? Is that a HIPAA violation? Just again, things you wouldn't think about on the front end, but they're definitely considerations that we have to think about now. What we've also took advantage of was pre-program training. So for our summer camp, our program director and assistant director set up office hours where they, volunteers were able to jump into a pre-assigned time or a time slot to practice Zoom techniques and to practice different Zoom technologies, so that when they were operating their programs in real time, that kind of learning curve is a little bit less steep, right? Because I didn't want to use the term flatten the curve. I know we all heard that, right? But that learning curve is a lot less steep because they've had the opportunity to practice. Another thing that we did were we recorded all of our Zoom sessions, right? We let the parents as well as the staff know that for multiple reasons. One is for for us to review later on and down the line, as Devin mentioned. With each passing program, we're learning more and more. So we can say, hey, you know what? Somebody mentioned this in the Zoom. Let's go back and review that and see what we can get from that, right? Or also from a safety perspective, right? If something comes up after a program and a camper parent say, hey, my kid was on Zoom and I heard a counselor say ABC, or whatever the case may be, we can go back and review that recording to make sure that everything that's happening during the program is on the up and up, right? And so in addition to that, we also, jumping down the list a little bit, we turn off the person-to-person chat so that the counselors let me back up a little bit. Okay, so when we, actually the 3 to 4 bottom points will kind of tie together. So one of the things that we do is when we bring the counselors in, all the staff, we make them co-host. We make them co-host for a couple of reasons. One, they're able to record the session. So when we do breakouts where the counselors are leading individual activities, they can still record those activities, right? In addition to that, as a co-host, they can move kids in from the waiting room, because for all of our programs, we use the waiting room feature for security purposes. In addition, as a co-host, they can chat with the camper directly, but the campers cannot chat with themselves directly. It has to be through the public chat. And one of the reasons we did that was because if, as you're monitoring the chat, you'll see all kinds of statements come up. And so if there's something that we train our counselors that if there's something comes up that's concerning, you as a counselor or whoever's identified in that role can reach out to that camper directly in a private chat and say, hey, Timmy, I noticed that you said your mom's angry at you. Do you want to share some more information with me about that, right? And so you can have that one-on-one private conversation where that counselor and that camper can interact privately and not in the midst of the group. Similarly, when we do breakout rooms, we try, again, kind of that rule of 3 thing. We won't put a counselor in a room with a camper by themselves. We'll make sure there's multiple counselors and or multiple campers in the room just for safety purposes. And then what we were able to do is we were able to secure several Zoom licenses for our individual programs. And so since the organization retains ownership of those licenses, we also have ownership of those recordings, right? So that people don't have to create their own Zoom accounts with the 40-minute limit. I don't know if that's still the case anymore, but whatever the limitations are for free Zoom accounts, we were able to work around those by having organizational Zooms. And another piece of the recording piece that we worked through is if you assign your counselor as a co-host and they make the recording of a a breakout room, they have multiple ways in which they can save that. It's typically to the cloud or to their laptop. But if they don't have an account, a paid Zoom account, they have to save it to their device. And then part of our protocol is that they then send that recording to Devin or I, so they get that recording off of their device and we put it in the repository. I know that seems like a lot, but it makes things easier for us to have those recordings, but also it keeps that information off of their laptop and out of their possession to minimize any HIPAA violations or minimize them using up their storage space on their device, because those recordings take up a lot of space. So.
And Daryl, we had a couple comments in the chat about, so Jennifer from Make a Dream said they also turned off the person-to-person chat for the kids and teens, which the kids didn't really like, but it helped for security purposes. And then I threw in the comment that we actually made a group text before each session that we had all the staff and volunteers on. Then if a staff got kicked out of the Zoom or something happened, we could still let each other know, or if we needed to talk about something that we didn't want the kids to see.
Yep. We've used different chat things like GroupMe. So the counselors will have a GroupMe, and that's something they can quickly disseminate information offline amongst the staff. So, and then to that end, with tech support roles, similar to this format, we tell our counselors or the program directors, make sure you assign a techie for each program. Usually that's Devin or I. So we'll hang back in the main room if they're using breakout rooms. And we're kind of the DJ in that sense, right? We're putting kids, or I should say, yeah, we're putting kids where they need to go. We're letting kids in. We're renaming them if need be. And so it helps the program team actually run the program. So what we'll say is, hey, we need 15 minutes on the front end to sort kids out into breakout rooms. So if you can just keep them active and keep them busy for those 15 minutes, while we sort people out in the breakout rooms, or get a song going or whatever the case may be, then we'll do that for you. And if kids get booted out, again, Devin and or myself are in the main room so that we can put kids where they need to go, or if we need to move the counselors around. So having someone assigned to that, that tech role is key to making sure that your program is run as smooth as possible for camp, right? Because camp is never 100% smooth. Yeah.
And then we have a question in the chat about, had anyone established a best practice for how long to keep the recordings?
I would actually love to hear if anyone in the audience has suggestions for that, because that's some of what we're kind of working through right now. Not only how long to retain them, but how to best save them. So we drop everything in a Dropbox, but if you've downloaded a Zoom recording, you know that there are like 4 different files for each recording, and the titles are not clear what it really is. So I don't know if anyone has done virtual programming and has a good suggestion for either of those pieces. Those are some of the things we're looking into right now as well. Designated external hard drive, saved all your recordings, photos. Okay. So yeah, that central database sounds like it's what people are doing. Cool. And we can chat more about that later as well.
And so what we did, instead of the external hard drive, we have a paid Dropbox subscription, a business Dropbox subscription. So we have, like, I'm using air quotes here, unlimited storage. So that's been helpful for us as well. So instead of an external hard drive, we'll download it to the cloud so that we can access it anywhere. But that's also good information too. So.
Awesome. And I love the comments about, not a super popular choice to turn off the chat, because we had the same thing happen to us. Again, we learned as we went along. So we did have the chat on for some of our early programs. And once we got into the programs where the campers were a little bit older, we noticed some things maybe that we don't want put in the chat. Not like inappropriate, like I need to call the parents and like get this kid out of here, but just like some things where it's like, watch your wording, like be nice, some of those things. And so we did turn off the chat like mid-program. oh my gosh, the uproars that came from those campers during that. What happened to the chat? Turn the chat on, turn the chat on, like just repeatedly. It's like, so I chuckle at that because we had that same exact thing happen. So basically, so we were talking about communication and that outside communication from the Zoom piece as well. And a lot of that communication piece comes into this as well. So the medical considerations that we've considered and that we really trained our staff on, really just being aware that, you know, again, captive audience versus, you know, you can get distracted. When our campers are in person, we have a policy at Camp One Step. They have to be there for the entirety of the program, unless it's like a medical situation, if they have to leave for treatment or, you know, leave for a doctor appointment. But other than that, like they have to be there. You can't decide I'm going to come 2 days late and then join for the rest of the program if you don't have like a legitimate excuse. With virtual, that's not really the case. And we've kind of set that precedent with our virtual programs of, you know, as long as you're communicating with us and you're explaining what's going on, it's okay if your camper is late to a session. It's okay if your camper can't sign on for the afternoon session or for a day. And part of that was just, again, understanding the reality of life is still going on. You're not in that camp bubble, and we need to be understanding of that if we want campers to attend our programs, especially with some of our teens. Some of our teens have work and they can't sign on for camp, but that's okay. They can join for the night sessions or tomorrow's session. And a lot of that comes with these medical considerations as well. So campers are still having clinic visits. They still may be going through treatment. They may be signing on for camp at their hospital room where they're in for treatment. And so a lot of that, we've worked really closely with our medical director. She's awesome. And she has done so much on this front of those considerations. And again, the sensitive information that we don't want shared. So with making all of our staff co-hosts, we remind them and we train them of like, if you hear something that you probably shouldn't be hearing, mute that camper. If you see something that you probably shouldn't be seeing, mute that camper's video, turn that video off, you know? So it's kind of just that processing and working through it. But also with that, all of that is communication. So the parents communicating with us communicating with the staff. Also with that, the counselors really communicating up to the program directors of, hey, I noticed so-and-so, you know, is really quiet today, or I noticed so-and-so doesn't look like they're feeling well. All of that can tie into the medical considerations. And obviously we know we have a very special population of campers. And so making sure we're considering that and we're training our staff on how to kind of look for some of those pieces or just to be aware that those things might happen. With that as well, just I think this is important to mention, we do still have medical staff who join our programs. And I know that may be a little different for some folks, but we're very fortunate. We have an amazing medical staff. We're constantly getting new people who want to get involved. And so we are trying to utilize them as best as we can, but I still don't think we have the perfect answer of what our medical staff role is for virtual programming, besides the fact that they're kind of acting as a counselor. And then if an emergency comes up that I'm going to talk about in a second, that's where they really step into that medical role and have to do more of those pieces. So part of that, we have set up an entire manual for a virtual emergency response plan. So we have copies of that. I don't think we got it uploaded to the conference page soon enough, so our apologies there. But if you want a copy of this emergency response plan, we're happy to share it. This was created by our medical director, and it covers the communication, roles, and response to all of the potential accidents or incidents that could happen during a virtual program. So we cover these for in-person training, you know, where's the nearest tornado shelter? What do we do for thunder, lightning, you know, all of those pieces. What do we do if a camper falls and hurts themselves? All of those things, we still wanted to make sure we were covering and training and considering on the virtual realm as well, because with cameras on, you know, some of these things can happen, and what do you do, right? So we had this manual, and we sent it out to all of the staff so that they had this reference if they needed it. So the things that the plan covers: non-life-threatening injury, illness, allergic reactions, life-threatening medical issues, severe weather, human threat, and fire. So if you have any questions on what could be considered under those things, just feel free to put it in the chat, but they're pretty self-explanatory. We are in the Midwest, so tornadoes are a very real thing that can happen. And actually, during our Utah Adventure program that we partner with the National Ability Center with in August, we had a horrible thunderstorm take place the first day of that program, trees down, internet's out, like horrible things happening. And so while none of those things happened while we were online, it was reassuring to know that, like, okay, these are very real things that happen, that we have a procedure to handle if something were to happen to a camper while on camera, or who's joining Zoom and then is no longer there, right? Like, what do we do? So we are happy to share this, and just kind of, I'm not going to go over obviously each individual thing, but just kind of some of the main plans that we did train our staff on and made sure they were aware of. The main, I guess, boxes to check for each of these things is staying calm, right? Not only is this happening to one person, but you have all these other faces on Zoom who are seeing how you react, and they're seeing potentially what's happening to this camper on their camera as well. So staying calm, asking direct questions, asking that camper, is there anyone who is in the house who can help you? And if, whether the answer is yes or no, that kind of changes how your plan of action goes, but just getting that information up front. Communicating to the group of, so-and-so needs some help right now. So we're going to go into a breakout room and we're going to figure this out. Again, staying calm, reassuring the group, because if they see something happen and then the camper's just gone in a breakout room, they're going to think the worst. And so being able to kind of walk them through that process and just say, like, we're figuring this out, it's okay, and we'll get back to you when we have more information. And so being able to, like I said, put that camper in a breakout room, this is where the medical staff comes in, put the medical staff in the breakout room with that camper, as well as another counselor maybe that's close to this person, or a program director who has all the contact information and whatnot for parents. So getting those folks into a separate breakout room and really just trying to work through whatever that potential issue is, step by step. Again, reassuring the camper, utilizing 911 if necessary. If someone is in the house, making sure you're communicating with them as well, of this is what happened, this is what we saw. Just basically, again, this is where that communication comes in, because even after that issue is solved or has moved offline, you still, as a counselor, have to be able to communicate what happened to your program director, who's then going to communicate it to us as the staff, right? And then we are then going to have to turn back around and contact the parents. And if the parents aren't involved from the start, that's a really scary phone call to get. We all know calling parents from camp is one of the scariest things that they imagine happening. And so being able to kind of walk through those things. So we again, this is our medical director. She's amazing. I'm sure there are more types of plans that could be added to this, but this is our really good start that kind of blanketed. Again, once we were able to take a breath and plan our virtual programs, not pivot them from in-person to virtual, we were able to come up with this and utilize this and disseminate this to our staff, which was a really important part of our trainings as well.
And Devin, someone just commented in the chat that they had a tornado warning and dangerous weather happen during their virtual camp. So they got to use their emergency plan.
It's one of those things that you don't want to have to put in place, but when you have it, it's kind of nice to be like, oh, well, we maybe needed it, right? Like that's the same thing again with that thunderstorm. We didn't actually need it on camera, but we were ready if it happened. So that's great to hear.
Awesome. So we'll share a few things that we learned. Devin mentioned, as we rolled along with each program, from the 1st to the 7th, we learned something different each time, right? And so the goal is to improve. And what I will also say is going forward with us, virtual will be a part of what we offer year round, because some of the things that we learned that aren't staff related, as Devin mentioned, our reach increased phenomenally. I was sharing with someone earlier today. We had two of our campers. One was a sibling that participated in sibling camp, and another was a child that was diagnosed that participated in summer camp and various other programs. They had to relocate to the UK for dad's work, right? And so they were in the UK and they participated from there. So we shipped their care package internationally. They got it and it was phenomenal. And they were in York, so they're about 6 hours ahead. So when he would join Zoom, he joined the program, we say, hey, what's it like from the future? Give us a report from the future. What's coming our way? And so it was exciting for them to be able to see that and engage in that and participate in it, because if it were still boots on the ground, they wouldn't have been able to participate. But one of the things that we learned that was huge was having activities that involve the staff. So to kind of break that down a little bit is when we began to plan our virtual programs and worked with the program leadership to develop what items would go in the care package. And I tip my hat to Devin because she spearheaded that and was phenomenal at it. We kind of had two lists, right? What the campers would get and what the staff would get, because the staff get boxes as well, because we still got to give them a t-shirt, right? It's camp. That's what keeps them coming back, the t-shirts. And so, when you're planning your activities out, within reason, try to have as much of it as possible for the staff to interact in. So similarly, when you're sitting in these presentations, you're just observing, right? You're listening, you're learning. Similar to that, your counselors want to be engaged. They want to participate. It helps the program go so much better when the counselors are participating alongside the campers as well, or in tandem with the campers, I should say, because everybody on the Zoom is having way more fun. Another thing we learned, the staff buddy system. What we're looking to do and what we will do is with our new staff, when they're engaging, especially while we're virtual, making sure that they have a returning staff member to pair up with or stay in contact with before the program starts. So just kind of walking through our process, we have the application process where the staff apply. We have to take the camper applications. Once we close the camper applications, we look at those ratios and what those needs are, and that tells us how many staff we need. So our staffing numbers are based on our camper numbers. So we go through the list of applications, we make sure that we have a certain number of new staff plus returning staff. And so the next time they'll hear from us is about their online training and then the mandatory staff orientation, be it a phone call on a Monday night or however that's set up for that particular program. There's kind of those gaps in communication where they don't hear from us, but having a returning counselor that they can reach out to and say, hey, this is my first program, is definitely my first virtual program. What can I expect? What tips can you give? That makes their experience that much better. And it makes that returning counselor, it gives them a different sense of ownership as well, because the new staff member may ask a question they hadn't thought of before, like, oh, gee, you know what? I hadn't thought of that, but that's a great idea. Again, that parallels with the new staff integration. We all know at one point we were all a new staff member, right? We were all a first-time staff member, and it's tough. It's tough because when you come to camp, whether it's in person or virtual, it's very connected, it's very intimate, it's very tight. It's, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in 6 months since the last program, or 6 days since the last Zoom, or whatever the case may be. It's very tight knit, right? And that can be very intimidating. When you were that first time staff member, were you intimidated when you saw everybody hugging, like, oh my gosh, everybody knows everybody except me, I'm the oddball out? So integrating your new staff will be key and integral. Again, also similar to that first point of balancing activities that your staff could participate in. So as we got further along in our programming, as we get to program 5, program 6, so on and so forth, we started bringing in more third parties. Like, for example, we worked with the Omaha Zoo to do virtual tours. They had a virtual underwater tour. They had a virtual endangered species tour. So bringing in those third-party activities are great. And we did a virtual escape room. The kids loved it. But the hard part for the staff is if you're bringing in third-party people to facilitate your activities, there isn't a whole lot for them to interact with, right? They're on the Zoom, they're there, they're present, and they're just observing. So it's not as it doesn't grab them as much as if they're actually participating. So again, having other folks come in and host activities for you is phenomenal. It's great. It's amazing. But again, you definitely want to keep in mind having pieces that your staff can participate in as well. One of the things that we learned, as much as the kids love having scheduled activity time, bunk time was a huge thing for us. Just having that time where they're in the breakout room with other counselors or other campers, that unscheduled activity time, and they're just hanging out, right? They're just talking, they're chatting, they're telling jokes, kind of that free time, if you will, with other counselors and other staff was huge for us, because that's where you have a lot of your bonding going on. Because in the virtual world, again, when you have a third party come in and they're hosting the activity and it's a big group and you got, 7 screens you got to scroll through to see everybody's faces, it's really cool having that small knit group, the small breakout group, where you can see everybody's faces, you can talk and have those intimate conversations, because those are the things that make camp so much more amazing. And another thing that we learned that we share with our staff, which is huge, is don't take it personal. Whether you're a program director, program leader, or a counselor, whatever the case may be, don't take it personal. If, we had several programs where the campers are logged on to Zoom, the camper has their screen up and they're doodling. Don't think that they're not engaged. Don't think that they're not paying attention. Don't think that they're not having a good time. We all know if you've led a program or activity before, you're spending days or hours or weeks, sometimes even a year, planning that this is going to be the best activity ever. It's going to be great. And then you have that one kid like, this is stupid. Like, no. Do you know how long we worked on this? This is not stupid. This is amazing. But again, don't take it personal if they seem disengaged, because what we share with our staff was, if their camera's on, if they're logged in, they are engaged. It's very easy for them to flip their laptop closed, turn off their phone, turn off their device, and log out. If they are there, they are engaged. They are getting something out of it. Even if it's just to hear that connection is still being made, whether they're actively participating in the activity or drawing. We had kids that would participate. That's exactly what they would do for a good portion of their Zoom time, is they would draw, they would paint, or whatever the case may be. And then we got the surveys back that said it was the best time ever because they were connecting with their friends, right? And so that was a huge piece that we learned. And for our counselors, it was tough because it seemed like the activities weren't that great. It seemed like it was a poorly executed activity. But again, the kids are logged on, they're enjoying it. Don't take it personal.
And Daryl and Devin, we have one comment in the chat that just said that cabin time was the most popular part of their virtual camp this summer.
I think one thing that kind of developed with that was really cool for us is it didn't start off that was part of the schedule. It came out from like camper requests during our summer camp program of like, hey, we really just want to hang out. We want to play a game. Like, can we schedule some more time? And because of that, that became a nightly ritual for that program. They were online. They had counselor support. They were just talking with their friends. They were playing games. And it would go 2-3 hours. And at some point, the counselors and the program directors had to literally be like, it's 11 p.m. like, you're teenagers, yes, but I also need to get sleep. Like, and so that became a really cool development that came along. And ever since our summer camp program, where that really grew and developed, it's been an integral part of all of our thing of understand, schedule this unscheduled time, and just know that these extra things are going to pop up, because that is definitely one of the most popular things for our camp too. So thank you for sharing that.
And someone commented that their evaluations asked for more cabin time.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's awesome.
And one of the things that kind of spun off coincidentally for us was our oldest teens for summer camp, 17 and 19-year-olds, is our Excel group. And their program leaders had evening activity from like, well, it's supposed to start at 7 o'clock and go to 9, but as Devin mentioned, it would go to 11 o'clock sometimes. It was called their fireside chats. And so again, it was just a scheduled block of time where they would just log into Zoom and talk or play games or do absolutely nothing, or watch a movie together, or whatever the case may be. And so that was so popular that they started having monthly fireside chats outside of any other program they were offering. And the campers sign up for it, and they look forward to it because it's a chance for them to re-engage with their camp family. So,
and that's what we have. So if anyone else has any questions or specifics, I know we covered training on a very general sense and more of like the considerations. And part of that is because our training has looked so different from program to program, understanding that one program's training is going to look very different. And we really haven't found that perfect sweet spot of this is what a perfect framework for virtual programming is. And so we're happy if you want to pick our brains, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, we're here to listen to any and everything.
And we do have one comment that from Make a Dream that they started doing virtual fireside chats for their older groups because those have been very popular.
One thing, and to that end, just really quickly, one thing that before the world blew up, we would have counselor nights twice a year for our staff, right? So, and once in the spring and once in the fall, where we would get our staff from all year round together and just have time for them to hang out at a local establishment, right? One of the things we were kicking around is, do we have a virtual counselor night where your staff can just log into Zoom and connect with each other and just have that hangout time? You know, because again, a lot of us, you know, are connected through social media and through other means, but, you know, is that something that is desired? So we're going to start looking at that and send a survey to our staff to see if they're interested in it and go forward from there.
Camp No Worries did night breaks throughout the spring, which were a counselor hangout. My camp, I tried doing a staff lounge on, it was just an open forum on Wednesday afternoons and Friday afternoons. So after we finished out of the sessions, and we just left it available for staff to join. I'd have like 2 or 3 people. So, but you know, they don't want to sit and talk to me much. They want to talk to each other.
Yeah, we did the same at COCA-I. We had a staff hangout night. It was supposed to be a game night, and we provided different online games and things for them to do. And we split them up into breakout rooms, and they all just ended up talking. So then we just brought them all into one big Zoom link, and it was a time for them to just chat and catch up with counselors that they hadn't seen in a while, or just reconnect with those friends who they make at camp that they weren't able to connect with this summer or in past summers because they've been busy. So I think it's awesome to be able to provide that space for staff as well.
This is Adrian from I highly recommend the night breaks. They asked us, actually, we had like 4 and they asked us for another one. We started doing it as like a game night where we had trivia, we had Jeopardy, and then it kind of just turned into they wanted to be together. And I think in the spring, all of us kind of needed that. kind of camaraderie. So I don't know going forward if it's going to be quite as successful, because, you know, the state of the world has changed a bit with the virus, but who knows how it'll go. But I highly recommend doing something because our staff really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I'm being a little snarky about that. I only had 2 or 3 people show up, but it was nice because I actually got, like, as executive director, I got to chat with those 2 or 3 people, and we just kind of hung out. We just talked about whatever. A couple of them were past campers, and we got to just chat about, hey, what are you doing for school? Have you thought about, you know, what you want to be when you grow up? That kind of stuff. And it was just sort of very free form, and we hung out. It was fine.
If you would like. Thank you so much, Devin and Daryl, for your presentation today.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you all so much for being here.